Okay. Well, Waking Sleeping Beauty talks about the Disney or discusses the lead up to and the moment when Disney had their animation renaissance. There was a period, obviously, when Walt Disney was head creator and founder and the sort of fountainhead of ideas. And this takes place after he's died. There's a change of the guard, both leadership-wise and in the animation. Old animators meeting new animators or young animators, and how did they transition to meet the unique challenges of the 1980s and 1990s? How did they adjust course and stumble or actually it turns out almost thoughtfully were able to put out animation films like they'd never seen before, things that were achieving awards and greater heights than anybody had ever seen from cartoons.
In my estimation, Waking Sleeping Beauty was it was a story of like Nick said, it was a story of Disney and when they were on the brink of being sold off into pieces. Roy Disney brought in Michael Eisner and Frank Wells and brought them in, and it turned into a story of kind of the right person in the right seat at the right time, and this unique time period, unique people with unique skill sets that kind of fit into this jigsaw puzzle right at the right time.
It's like a classic story, not a love story, but a story that they were on the brink and they came back against all odds and they turned into just a superpower company, and putting out some amazing stuff, and they've continued to do that in the last few years, and it's just like everything that they do now just seems to strike gold.
I also felt that this documentary did seem to be a study in contrast and also a study of egos, and a classic case of don't judge a book by its cover, because you saw so many things that to anyone on the outside seeing the success of Lion King, Sleeping Beauty, blah, 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 everyone would wonder that, wow, everything is great at Disney. But we know that after seeing the documentary, we saw that there were so many problems. Even on the study of contrast, it was also these two guys, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. They were poles apart, and yet apparently their leadership did lead to some good things at Disney. Of course, there were other people also who contributed largely to that, but these two guys were somewhere closely associated with that portion. And to see,
Chuck had mentioned there was a plan in place. Michael Eisner had certainly said Disney Animation is the heart of the body of the company, and there was an intention to reinvest into the animation department. And yet, as Indraneel pointed out, there was so much clash of ego, so many, and as we watched it, so many missteps, so many bad habits that got brought in that could have killed the momentum, and yet they were able to achieve these incredible, able to create these incredible pieces of art that were both beautiful and unimaginably successful.
I think how peculiar the character of what's his name, how peculiar the character Jeffrey Katzenberg was. I think the documentary portrayed him as kind of a villain, and at sometimes in the documentary I saw that, and in other times I didn't. And I think one of the things that really surprised me about him is on 2 separate occasions he pulled all of the animators into a meeting and was looking for honest feedback. Hey, how am I doing? How am I treating you? How do you guys feel about your job and your work-life balance? And and on 2 separate occasions, and maybe he did it more, but in the documentary they talked about it in 2 separate occasions. And then kind of right after that, they made a point of saying, well, he did that but nothing changed, right? So I wish I could go into his brain and figure out why he did that. I'm sure it had something to do with ego. He wanted to, maybe he was getting them all together to to fluff up his ego a little bit, to see what he was doing right. But
as all things were coming together in I'm thinking it was the mid 90s when The Lion King was getting ready to release, and they really should have been celebrating the successes and the rebound and the forward momentum they have created. It was really imploding. They had that announcement where they weren't really all on the same page, and things were great, right, from the outside looking in. And then they taped all their recordings instead of doing it live in front of the rest of the team, and it just kind of left you with a funny taste in your mouth. So it was, I think, very surprising how they weren't really able to enjoy all their hard work and really the culmination at that point of everything they had put in, rebuilding their little brand.
Was that despite the fact that everyone at the top management knew that cost is an issue, despite that, the one meeting which Jeffrey called up to tell everyone from across Disney Studios that guys, we don't have budget for this, and then everybody flies back in Concords and whatnot. That was really, really silly. I mean, they were willing to move an entire office of animators by simply sending a memo, not even a face-to-face interaction, and to tell them that guys, we don't have budget for something. That action seemed quite, well, to be very polite, let's say silly. But among the two, I'm tending to think that maybe Peter Schneider, for certain reasons, is my favorite character. So the reasons for that is that despite all the descriptions that have gone about him, how people saw him, one very important thing that he said at the time of his appointment is that I'm not coming with any of the past baggage. And the worst that I can do is, I can't do anything worse than the Black Cauldron. So, and later on, everything else that followed, he did show certain things which showed that he's bringing in a breath of fresh air.
I think the most important, or excuse me, I think the person that I most admired in this was definitely Frank Wells. And it's funny, he wasn't really in the documentary a whole lot. He was just kind of there. He was described as, kind of being the peacemaker, the marriage counselor, the guy who kind of kept things together. But he was also described as, he was seen as like the business guy and the safe guy, but he was also the guy that, took crazy risks in his personal life, climbing mountains and, all this stuff. But I think what lynched it for me was when he said the most important leadership quality is humility. And I agree with that. I think going into any sort of conversation or situation, it's best to head into it with an open mind and genuinely listen to other people's points of view, empathy, and not come in with the answer, but come in with humility to find the best answer.
About, as I mentioned before, or as I had said, how did they, even though there was all this stuff working against them, how did they come out to be where they got to be where they were? How did they rise up even though there was all this stalled momentum? How did they keep that momentum going even though there were some pretty poor management leadership decisions? And one of those, and it touches on Indraneel's point, was it the heads of the operation who were making this happen? Well, I happen to think part of it was, or a large part of it was due to the talent that they attracted or brought on board. And one of those, my most admired person, is Howard Ashman, the songwriter that they brought in to write the music for the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. I was walking yesterday in Brooklyn thinking about this meeting and thinking about Howard, and I was reading the lyrics to a part of that world. I got to a point where she sings, "Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun, wandering free. Wish I could be part of that world." And I thought, that's me. I'm an outsider. I want to be in the sun, and I swear. And I realized I was in Brooklyn, and I started to get choked up. This teenage cartoon mermaid was making me choked up because I identified with her, and that was the power of Howard Ashman's lyric.
So I looked at it from a kind of a different angle. I think the legacy and the impact of Walt Disney himself is pretty impressive. And I know that a common question asked within Disney is, what would Walt do, still to this day. So I think walking away, he laid the foundation and had the vision of this company that probably has by now exceeded his expectations probably tenfold. But he was, he still has that lasting impact. And Walt Disney, I've read books on him, and it's pretty cool, some of the forward thinking technological things that he had in his mind that he wanted to do, and the steps that he took when it came to, when they were building the amusement park, and he walked different amusement parks and said, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, but here's what I want to do instead to make it the happiest place on earth. And it is. You go to Disney and it's pretty, you're dropping boatloads of money, but it's something you really never forget, and the kids never forget it. And
I think the main thing that I learned is if you have the right vision and the right people in the right seat, for the most part, and I'll touch on Howard Ashman as well. I don't think that, I don't think that those movies would have been as big without him. Like it's you want to talk about the right person in the right seat. I don't think there's a better story of that than Howard Ashman there. So I guess that's in a nutshell, the right person in the right seat with the right vision. It's amazing what can happen.
Well said, Brandon. That was pretty awesome. I think what I took away is just put that plan in place, and you're gonna have to adjust the plan, but stick to the direction you want to ultimately end up with, the vision, like Brandon said. It's that's paramount. If you know where you're going, it helps. You'll get there if you keep sticking to your guns and adjusting. I think one of the overall themes in the entire program was there's a lot of technological advancements throughout the course, and of course there were, but when you leverage those to get to help propel yourself to where you need to be, that's where all the success came in. When they started showing, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, and they really embraced the different ways of creating the animation. I think it sparked a lot of creativity, and that's where you saw the exponential growth within that team and the animation studio department. So I think that's.
And so my biggest lesson, as somebody who tends to tinker with a process to try to make it even better than it already is when you have the right people in the right place at the right time, don't mess with the magic, because you got it made in the shade.
God willing, if I get that kind of success, would I be able to pull myself away from the temptations of power and fame and all that? I mean, I have the money, but what do I really need to do to ensure that I keep my ego or keep myself grounded, so to speak? So this was a big question for me. I began wondering that what happens to most of us as we age? Where does the enthusiasm or the creativity that we have in our earlier age, where does it go and why does it go? Why is it that only a select few of us are able to keep it alive till the end, keep things fresh, and not tell the younger generation that, oh, you don't know anything, just sit down. I had a visual of business as a seesaw, and I began wondering whether that first, for the best and or steady growth, does it need to be a perfectly balanced thing between, for example, prioritizing profits if survival is in danger, and once you know that okay, you are completely out of the woods and you're flush with cash, then and then only you prioritize creativity. You put more weight on that so that you can experiment, you can throw money at it and whatever is required. Or is it that no matter what situation you are in, you have to ensure a balance somewhere? That was also another thought that came to me.
If I could, I like the seesaw analogy. I think with business, something that was always hit me as a former mentor shared with me, the pendulum. So the pendulum swings back and it swings forth. Things are really good right now, but you know, you've got to also keep in mind that there are going to be opportunities and there are going to be struggles in the future. And if you can prepare for those and be ready and do the things to set yourself up during that time to remain profitable from a business aspect, you'll come out on the other side a lot more strong. And the seesaw analogy really, you know, it allows, there are going to be tough times in the future, but know that they're going to happen. And what are you going to do to stay in front of it, to prepare yourselves? And we're 1 year into this thing, and who would have known? You know, 13 months ago it would have been such a drastic change for all of us. So I think
just to touch on that shortly, I think having foresight and expecting bad things to happen, so that you're prepared, and you know, financially, people wise, you know, having, you know, training in place, having, you know, not necessarily doomsday scenarios, but, you know, just, you know, having an overall, you know, vision for, hey, this is how we do business, and but also being open to, you know, when things change, like when a pandemic hits, how can we still do our business, or how can we be nimble and change the way that we are approaching things, so that we can still service our customer, and we can still have our employees be taken care of, and you know, have them be able to take home an income, and still keep going. I think the seesaw is a great analogy for the way that the world works. But I think as leaders, we have to level out the seesaw and not be moved by what the world is doing, and keep it level, no matter if we're up or down.
If there's ever a opportunity to make that same plan for, well, what if this hits way more than we could have ever imagined? And like, do we have a plan for that? Yeah, seeing the unimaginable benefit of following Walt's creative trajectory that he set the company on, realizing that where its most basic element, which is, as Eisner said, the heart of the company is the animation, the feature animation. And what are we going to do when that just skyrockets? Because it was that idea that launched all of those Little Mermaid and and Beauty and the Beast into the parks and into all of these other avenues for revenue that turned a really great success like Beauty and the Beast being nominated for best film into a massive success for the company.